Welcome, everyone. So my name is Sabrina Kleisel. I am an associate at the Carbon Trust, and I'll be your host of today's panel discussion. I'm the program coordinator for the BASE Industrial Energy Efficiency Accelerator, and having been involved in the IA now for almost 3 years, I can say I'm really delighted to have seen so many of our phase one and two projects progress from project inception to the stage where they're now commercialized and ready to scale up. I'll let the panel introduce themselves in a minute. But before this, I'd like to provide a quick introduction and remind you that we are broadcasting the event live through an interactive platform. So you're very welcome to send in questions to our speakers. Just click on the Q&A tab on your right-hand side and press the blue plus button to add your question. All questions will be anonymous, and you can also upvote questions that have already been asked by clicking the thumbs up next to it. So now the panel speakers. So here with me are Alexandra Brennan, Head of Sustainability at Johnson Service Group, David Jukes, Program Development Director at Costain and Project Lead for the South Wales Industrial Cluster, Dr. Richard Lees, Industrial Policy, Energy and Climate Change Director at the Mineral Products Association, Karen Oliver-Spry, Investment Programs Manager at Hull and East Yorkshire Local Enterprise Partnership, and Paul McKinney, IEA Program Manager at the Carbon Trust. Welcome all, and thanks for joining. So 2 weeks ago, almost 2 weeks ago, the International Energy Agency has released their Energy Efficiency 2021 Flagship Market Report. And their key message was that even though energy efficiency improvements are returning to the level that we have seen before the pandemic, they are still well below the pace we need to see in a net zero pathway. So even though that statement was made with the global economy in mind, I feel like it's also very true here for us in the UK. So the UK has set the target to reach net zero by 2050. And as we know, this meant also a step change an ambition for decarbonizing industry. So like the rapid decarbonization of the industrial sector is a critical component in achieving net zero. We know the industrial sector contributes significantly to the country's GDP, but at the same time also represents a major source of harmful greenhouse gas emissions, contributing 15% of the UK's total emissions, the third largest contributor after energy production and the transport sector. Industrial energy efficiency measures, such as the 16 technologies supported by the IEA, bring down energy demand and reduce costs across the system, while at the same time improving the competitiveness of the sector. Our analysis has shown that the 16 IEA technologies alone have the potential to reduce the UK's industrial emissions by 1%. So this just highlights the enormous emission reduction opportunity we have at hand. And just imagine what can be achieved if we maintain the focus on accelerating those industrial efficiency technologies that are still in the innovation pipeline and under development. So on day one of our meeting, the Net Zero Challenge event yesterday, we've heard from government. We heard Mark Taylor. He spoke about the different approaches BASE are following to support industry and ensure it can move towards net zero, but also stressed that the government wants to learn from industry what it needs to achieve these targets so informed policies can be implemented. So with today's panel, we want to discuss on what is already happening in the industrial sector in terms of moving towards net zero, what lessons have been learned, how can we share these lessons across the different sectors, across various companies, and what is still needed to ensure we reach our climate targets in time. So before diving now into these topics, let's start with just a quick round of introduction. Alexandra, if I could ask you to start and introduce yourself and your organization.
Thank you. My name's Alexandra Brennan. I work for Johnson Service Group, which is a textile services organisation. Essentially, we rent workwear and hotel linen, and we launder the products for our customers as well. So we are incredibly energy intensive as an organisation. Background-wise, I have over 15 years in sustainability, primarily in the energy sector. I've worked quite a lot in the oil and gas and the nuclear industries and moved into this sector this year. Johnson's is quite at the early start of its sustainability journey. We're at the stage where we're trying to understand what our impact is and therefore how we can reduce that impact and what targets we need to be starting to put in place.
Great, thank you. David, if you could go next.
Thank you, Sabrina. My name is David Jukes. I work for Costain. I'm a program development director, and I lead decarbonisation efforts for Costain in Wales. I head the lead partner role for the South Wales Industrial Cluster in their Industrial Decarb Challenge deployment project. This project has 17 partners, including all the major industry and power emitters in South Wales. I also lead a number of other decarbonisation projects for Costain, including SBRIs for hydrogen production for transportation and an Ofgem NIC electricity resilience as a service project. I also sit on a number of regional energy strategy and academic advisory boards.
Great, thank you, David. Richard?
Morning, Sabrina, and morning, delegates. I'm Richard Lees. I'm Director of Energy and Climate Change and Industrial Policy at the Mineral Products Association, where I'm also Director of MPA Cement, so the product group that looks after cement. Mineral Products Association is quite a broad church. We look after the interests of the aggregates, asphalt, cement, concrete, silica sand, mortar, and associated industries. In terms of my role, I look after the innovation programme. So I've been involved in the IEA development. We've also got a range of other innovation projects on the go at the moment, funded via Innovate UK and BEIS on things like fuel switching. In terms of our decarbonisation journey, I guess we're quite a way down our decarbonisation journey. Already reduced emissions by 53% in the cement industry since 1990, which is decarbonising faster than the UK as a whole. But currently we're still 1.5% of UK greenhouse gas emissions, so we've still got some way to go. We've got our roadmap to beyond net zero, whereby we've got to make that 1.5% zero or even lower. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Richard. Karen?
Hi everyone, I'm Karen. I'm the Investment Programmes Manager at the Hull and East Yorkshire LEP. I manage over £150 million worth of capital investment programmes, from the kind of big infrastructure investments from the Local Growth Fund and Getting Building Fund down to our small business investment grant programmes, Growing the Humber and Growing Hull and East Yorkshire. I'm also the representative for the LEP on the North Eastern Yorkshire Energy Hub board. I'm quite active there, and was active in the development of the Humber Industrial Cluster Plan, both in phase 1, where I led the LEP's role within that, and in developing the bid that was successful for phase 2.
Great, thank you, Karen. And Paul?
Thanks, Sabrina. So you've been seeing me talk already, but I'm the program manager for the Industrial Energy Efficiency Accelerator on behalf of BEIS. But more broadly within the Carbon Trust, I look after, I'm sitting in the technology programs team, so tend to work on sort of program activity. I've been involved in industrial energy efficiency, product energy efficiency through the energy technology list. And in the past, I've been involved in the sort of dissemination of good and best practice advice to industry as well. And I sort of started over 25 years ago, been doing this maybe too long, but working on good practice projects and new practice demonstration projects in the ceramics industry and in the minerals industry and cement industry, actually. So it's nice to see that some things have moved on. Not everything's gone quite as quickly and as smoothly as what we might have hoped all those years ago, but certainly the coverage and the impetus and the sheer focus on energy saving and carbon reduction now is just nothing like it was when I started.
Great, thank you, Paul. So I would like to start our discussion now with the question, how do we bring deployment of innovation more quickly to the wider market? So we know innovation is connected with certain levels of risk, sometimes also with like a perceived high risk. So what do you think is needed to accelerate the deployment? David, could I start with you?
Yes, thank you, Sabrina. So I think one of the first things we have to do is to move the decision makers away from this VHS, Betamax, Xbox, PlayStation, or probably the more closely related to net zero, the electrification versus hydrogen fuel cell style of thinking. I think choice is essential for the changes necessary to achieve net zero targets. I think a holistic approach is necessary to decarbonize, and a significant danger emerges when purveyors of one technology or approach being the right choice don't embrace that the preferred choice is one part of the whole solution. And I also think we need to encourage that choice and diversity for the majority to follow early adopters more swiftly.
Great. Anybody who wants to comment on that?
I think there's an opportunity for engagement and education at the senior level still. I think there's a wanting to be innovative, but there's also, as you mentioned, there are potential risks involved, and there's still quite a reluctance at senior level management, particularly with smaller organisations and traditional organisations that perhaps aren't as used to moving in that direction. So I do think there's still an opportunity around there about engagement and demonstrating why innovation is a good thing and showing the learning from positive experience as to how we can use innovation in a positive way despite the potential risks that there are.
Great.
I think if we look at it from the kind of larger business perspective, many of the companies, in fact, all of the companies in the UK cement industry have an international dimension. 4 out of the 5 are global multinationals, and what we need to do is attract investment into the UK. That's difficult sometimes when there are potentially more attractive markets elsewhere around the world with more attractive investment potential. So the UK's got to be attractive, and the policy context around operating businesses in the UK has to be right. Right now, we're seeing electricity prices in the UK that are considerably above our competitor countries in Europe, and that means that if we want to move towards electrification in any of our processes, it's going to be more expensive in the UK to do so. So that kind of thing needs addressing if we're going to attract inward investment and deploy particularly some of the electrification type processes.
I think there's an element also of kind of finding better ways to connect the dots and as David suggested, moving away from this kind of silo mentality of different technologies in different spaces and that kind of thing. And I think it's important to remember that a lot of the innovation that's taking place is being done by really, SME businesses, quite small outfits that perhaps need a bit more support and a bit more of a platform, and to actually showcase what they're doing and actually help to accelerate some of the developing technologies and into kind of demonstrators and then deployment. through networks and incubators, and we're kind of getting there. There are really good examples in the Hay area. We've got the Euro Innovation Centre, for example, which is really good at bringing small innovators together with academics to build on their innovation and ideas. But there's probably more we can do on a wider regional and national scale to develop that and create a network that really supports innovation processes going through from inception through to deployment.
Paul, is there something you agree with?
Yeah, I mean, it won't surprise you to, in my current role, to know that that sort of picking up on what Karen said there, that demonstration, the showcasing of what's available, and that can be that sort of starts with making sure that the R&D is known about and everyone can see the upcoming technologies that are underway, and then particularly demonstration. I said yesterday, I think that when the IEA started, certainly in the past, there's always been this view that there's been lots of reasonable, never enough, but a reasonable amount of funding towards the sort of R&D, but clearly there's this always a risk averseness and a reluctance to take on technology until it's been proven, and the more we can do to do demonstration of get through that valley of death up to the first example, and not just the first example, but the second and the third example before things become established, and to give time for the sort of keep supporting the technology development while there's time for the cost to come down. I think that's sort of really important. So through that, there's various different elements to support through that demonstration phase, and it's not just the first example and then everyone's going to take it up. That after the first example, the technology is probably going to still be expensive, and so you do need to continue with support through that, and that's partly government support, but I'm sure there's persuading the investment community to put more into that arena is a challenge, but important as well.
So we hear about early adopters being key, but what can we do to make the others follow more swiftly in taking up those proven technologies? Is there any example, Alexandra, maybe you have from your role?
Yeah, I think that there's two sides to it. I think the early adopters are falling into possibly two pockets. You have the early adopters who want to do it and are very committed and open to sharing the technology once it's been developed. And then you have the early adopters who see it as a differentiator from a commercial aspect. And it's very difficult then to get them to understand the wider benefit to business and society if they are happy to share that technology rather than have some kind of commercial stranglehold on it. So I think there's something there. What Paul was saying about the investment and the sharing and the knowledge share, I think is really important to allow businesses to understand. Yes, we understand that you want to position yourself as a leader, and if you have given the time and the funding to help develop the technology, you want to have some kind of ability to have a commercial, impact or a commercial advantage of utilizing it. But then we also need to be able to share that technology and not kind of keep a stranglehold on it. And I think it's really important that we do share the learning, whether that's positive or negative, because otherwise, I'm very much about telling a story and bringing people along on the story. I think that's the only way we can do this. And whether that is you're talking internally about bringing your colleagues along on your journey, or whether that is talking about bringing other organizations along on that journey, it's all about sharing the processes and sharing the positives and sharing the benefits, whether that is, like I say, internally, the benefits for your organization or the benefits externally. And I think that there's a lot more collaboration between industry that would help that. I think early adopters are almost the shining stars, but I think sometimes that collaboration between early adopters, but then also between the early adopters and the rest of the industry, needs to be strengthened a little bit.
Maybe I could share an experience on this, because the Mineral Products Association, because we're the association for all of the UK cement manufacturers, we've collaborated together so that, you know, in our IEA project on low carbon multi-component cements, the risk is shared, the benefit is shared. You know, the whole industry then learns from the innovations that have taken place in that project, and that means that not only can we deploy it faster to market, but also more widely. I think it's been a great success in doing that. But we shouldn't kind of, or we should recognise that there are some inhibitors to working in that way. Things like competition law, you know, so that is a considerable inhibitor in me working together with my member companies as a unit. So there is more we can do to, you know, kind of try and break down some of those barriers to collaborative working. But certainly, you know, when we can do it, and it does happen, it works very well.
You must see, Richard, so you must see both sides of that. Obviously, as you said, competition law can inhibit competition within your industry, but presumably you also see the what Alexandra was talking about in terms of the companies that get a competitive advantage about new technology and want to keep it to themselves for at least for a time. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, the competition law doesn't, you know, inhibit the competition. It inhibits the collaboration to a degree. Yes, I guess, you know, it can, you know, kind of reduce the commercial benefit of first mover advantage. But I think when we've got all of the UK cement producers signed up to a Beyond Net Zero roadmap, then they all recognise the importance of decarbonisation, and I think, you know, that is one thing that we can share in common.
Great. David, if I could ask you, as like the South Wales Industrial Cluster, what kind of lessons learned or like experience sharing have you facilitated? If it's positive, or as Alexandra said, also sometimes negative lessons, but lessons learned is a lesson learned.
Yeah, so we've been very fortunate though. The two projects, some project, the one that Karen involved in the cluster plan, but also we're over 30 partners in South Wales, and they effectively, we cover most of the major emitters, and we work very collaboratively together. Given the anti-competitive legislation, we have to take that into account, obviously. But the one thing that it has started to do is to build trust within the sort of necessary non-disclosure agreements and commercial sensitivities. It has allowed partners to build trust, and I think from our point of view, one of the major focuses is on transportation and fuels, but also hydrogen, carbon capture, and storage. Without collaboration and sharing information, it's very difficult for a balance of the supply to be put in place. Having that understanding of all the requirements of the region helps businesses to actually invest. And it also, picking up on one of Richard's earlier points, it also helps them. A lot of our businesses are global, and it helps them to feed into their global headquarters that actually they are part of a joined up region.
Great. Thank you, David. Karen, maybe just to focus on, I think a point mentioned was mentioned earlier is where should we prioritize? Like, what are the key areas? Are we talking about research, development, demonstration, or is it like the final step about deployment?
I think to some extent it depends what sector and what technology you're talking about, because inevitably some technologies are already more advanced than others, and some are very, very early development or even at research stage. But I think probably for me, it's not so much focusing on one of those specific areas, but actually focusing on the continuum and actually connecting all of those processes together in a kind of facilitated progression. Because I think what we have at the moment is kind of separate pots of funding for each of those elements, and there's always a big push to secure the funding for the research, do the research. Hooray, we've done the research, it works, it's amazing. And then it stalls because you've got to start all over again trying to find out, so how do we actually develop this further? How can we find funding for it? How do we get the resources and the expertise in? And at each stage, it's kind of stop-start. And I think probably the focus needs to be on smoothing that process and actually getting a cleaner line of sight that starts with research and takes it through logically to deployment.
I think a greater engagement between the R&D companies and the industrial companies on a wider scale is perhaps a gap that needs to be addressed. So within Johnson's, we've been supporting two quite small startup organisations with a project at one of our sites. They've been doing the R&D, and they have been doing the kind of the phase 1 feasibility proving stage at one of our sites. And I think that link between having industry opportunities for R&D to prove their technology, it's beneficial for them because they can prove it, and then they can demonstrate it when it comes to the next stage of deployment or further kind of proof of concept. But it's also important for industry because they can see the technology actually working in a true situation. And I think that's something that's important as well. It's understanding what is, picking up on what Karen says about the different types of, what the different types of innovation or the different types of energy. I think it's understanding what is relevant to the different industries and the different businesses, because some types of energy is never going to work in certain industries, and kind of addressing that kind of collaboration and link between the two groups of matching up the right R&D with the right industry examples where they can demonstrate and prove it, I think would be really, really important and really useful and a step forward.
Yeah, picking up on Alexandra's point just now, Paul, with the IEA is trying to create this link and bringing together technology developers with industry. So what have been your experience in what is needed to bring those two groups together and make sure industry also knows about different innovations that have been proven or are like in the demonstration pipeline, so to say?
Well, firstly, it's very difficult, and it's probably one of the harder aspects of the sort of the recruitment phases of the IEA is the number of ideas that come to us from technology developers where they've got a great idea but they haven't got an industry partner to demonstrate it in, and the length of time that even when they can maybe be introduced to industry partners that might be interested in it, the length of time to go through sort of awareness and interest and then wanting to take part in it is a long time. Now, obviously, we try and address that through the IEA by asking industrial companies as well to register with us and let us know that they're in if they haven't got projects themselves, that they're interested in finding out about the ideas they're taking part. And we have a matchmaking platform which we mentioned earlier, and you can access to try and a networking platform that we can you can sort of see other parties that are interested. But I do think it's difficult. As Alexandra said, I mean, I've come across other companies as well, that larger companies that run effectively their own competitions quite similar to ours to get technology developers to submit ideas, and then they fund a certain number of them and take them through to demonstration, and that's really great, and clearly like to see more of that. Companies themselves, because the technology developers are desperate to get out there and find a market. So I'm sure there's no shortage of applicants, and a number of them aren't relevant straight away. But I think certainly the bigger companies with the more well-known names, when they go out looking for ideas, I'm sure there'll be no shortage coming in, and it's a real opportunity for them. And of course, once the technology developers have then got, if they can get the endorsement, as it were, of they're working with with a larger company or a well-known company, then that then makes the whole process of getting investment for them easier as well. But it's not easy, and the more we can do to showcase and everyone can do to showcase the sort of technologies that are coming through, then maybe that helps the environment more generally.
Just add to that. I mean, I think it was Karen that made the point earlier about the connectivity between the different elements of research and deployment. I think this is where we could, as a UK kind of collective, make a big difference, because at the moment we have a number of different pots of funding for different TRL levels, for different scopes of industry, and some require SME involvement, and others are kind of more broadly applicable, and all of that is hugely complex for businesses who've got a product to make and a market to serve, and I think what would be hugely beneficial is if we look at some kind of sector level opportunity, whereby we can take kind of research and development and deployment through the whole kind of innovation supply chain in a sector, rather than making kind of various pots available, various pots of cash available, that then are difficult to join up. At the moment, I think it's too disparate in the kind of funding space.
I think I would agree, Richard. I think another way that this potentially could be done is to focus more on regions, not just clusters, but actually the specific needs of regions, and so that the funding can mirror the requirements to decarbonize or to innovate in a particular area, and can actually address the industries and the SMEs and the innovators in that area with the funding. I think at the moment a lot of the challenges with the funding is sometimes that funding doesn't meet industry's natural rhythm with regards to how industry has to implement technology. Normally that would be done during a shutdown period or during a natural break in whether it's seasonal, and sometimes that funding doesn't actually match that natural industry rhythm or cycle. So perhaps by funding being put to a region, so that the region can look at how best to spread that innovation funding to the requirements of that area is a way potentially to go in the future.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Sorry, just want to say, Karen, I see you nodding, so agreeing with Richard and David's points.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways there's a kind of a mechanism already established for that, or maybe multiple mechanisms through the LEPs, the combined authorities, and the energy hubs. I think that the challenge is at the moment there's so many unknowns about the funding that's coming through, in the next few months, let alone the next few years. A lot of uncertainty for those organisations, which makes it difficult to develop strategy and develop the services needed to underpin the funding mechanisms. And I think there's a kind of a wider point as well around the way that, you know, it's primarily government funding in the last couple of years has been concentrated within quite a short time frame. So we've had the cluster plans and the cluster sequencing competition and, you know, the deployment projects all happening at the same time. And it kind of comes back to this point that was made earlier around trust in sharing knowledge and that kind of thing, because yes, the experience of the Humber Industrial Cluster Plan is that the partners, we don't have as many as Wales. We've got 10 in all, but there's more trust being built up. But at the same time, there's a limit to how much information the partners, the industrial partners especially, can share, because they're going through, you know, deployment projects, cluster sequencing, applications at the same time, and it's kind of inhibiting the kind of development and progression of the programs and projects that could go forward.
Yeah, so you mentioned, sorry.
So I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, I think it's fair enough point actually that I mean, when we started the IEA 4 years ago, I think there was one other competition going on that was potentially had some overlap and was around at the same time. And this time around, there seem to be quite a few that and they don't necessarily overlap, but they, like Richard says, they some of them are complementary, but they've all got their own set of 40-page or 50-page guidance notes and application forms, and I'm sure it is hard, especially for the smaller companies, to understand simply which program is for them and isn't. We certainly do try when we're promoting one program to also talk about the others when we've been along to industry trade bodies, for example, to sort of present more than you know, which is suitable for each. But it's I can understand that's a challenge.
So yeah, talking about different like finance mechanisms and like the support, obviously coming also from government. What is needed from the business side to either complement those funding options or just in addition? Is there, Alexandra, is there from Johnson's side, what's your approach to this?
Yeah, I think it's difficult for organisations when they're at the start of the journey. So if I take my past experience, I've worked for a lot of big corporates in the energy sector who are at the forefront of kind of supporting these kind of activities. And as Paul mentioned, there's many examples that I've been involved in of big corporates running competitions of their own to kind of look to the next wave of innovation in their particular area. I think when you get to smaller organizations that perhaps don't have the financial resources to be able to do that, I think there needs to be some kind of, again, a collaborative approach. The organizations and the industry bodies for those organizations probably could do something together better so that there are industry-wide competitions of some kind. There could be, you know, ability for the organizations, the larger organizations within an industry to support the smaller organizations within the same industry to have access to the new technology and the innovations that are coming. But again, you know, we've talked about the problems with, you know, competition requirements or competitive advantage. So I think there's opportunities for breaking down barriers to look at how industries internally can look to support the development from, I use the word competition, but whatever kind of scheme you run to support that innovation that is relevant to particular industries. But I think there's a wide kind of call for just in general businesses understanding that taking risks on innovative processes is not necessarily a bad thing. And if those innovations don't work out, well, we've taken one step forward in understanding what may or may not work out. But I do think there's also some education for organisations with their investment partners to understand we're putting a potential financial risk to support the innovation and the development of potential new technology in this area. So I think, again, it's a whole cycle. It's about the collaboration in the industries. It's about the collaboration between organisations and their investment bodies, and then understanding how can larger organisations support smaller organisations to support the technological advancement. And I think there's a big, for me, I see kind of both sides of that. Obviously, like I say, coming from big corporate, they have the ability to do this internally within their big global organizations. Whereas now I'm with it's still a big organization, but on a smaller scale. And there's a lot more in the industry that I'm in now. There's a lot more much smaller organizations that are much more financially risk averse to support the innovation, because they just can't afford to spend money on supporting a project that doesn't work. So I think there's room there for better collaboration across the board to support the kind of the engagement and the support of innovation development in industry. And I do think that's fundamentally important. I think there is some fantastic technology developers out there. The big stumbling block, and I've mentioned it before, and Paul mentioned it, is getting that technology into a proving stage within industry. Because as soon as you can demonstrate that you've proved your technology for a particular industry or a particular organization, you add credibility to your new innovation. And that credibility then helps that technological provider to either deploy further and advance further that technology, but also it gives them the credibility for perhaps the next innovation that they come up with. An organisation is more likely to help and support them trial that next innovation, because they've got evidence that they have already done similar successful projects and developments. And I really do think for us to get anywhere, organisations and industry needs to be much more open to supporting that proving stage of technology.
Can I also say that I think the current mechanisms don't necessarily reflect the scale of the challenge?
Yeah.
I'll take a particular region, the Cardiff Capital region here in South Wales. It covers 10 local authorities. There are 40 locations in those 10 local authorities that have the name industrial estate in their name. That's doesn't include business parks and all the rest of it. If you think about the number of organizations that are within those 40 industrial estates, we're not reaching them. We're reaching some, but we're not reaching them, which in a way goes back to my point about regions, that we really need to be able to find solutions for regions. And I agree with what Karen says. The LEPs are doing a great job, and in Wales we'll be having a similar process next year. But we need to be able to touch all of those smaller organizations. A lot of the focus seems to be, from both devolved and UK government, focused on the major emitters, but actually there's a lot of others within industry and manufacturing that need to be helped as well.
I think just on that, David, I just wanted to say as well, I think that a lot of those smaller organisations want to be involved in this journey. They just don't know how, or they're not sure where to start, or what programmes are right for them, or even start conversations about how I do something different. And so I do think absolutely we need to bring those smaller organisations along.
Karen, any idea how we can connect the SME smaller ones?
It's $1 million question, isn't it? I mean, clearly there are examples of programs and kind of areas where SMEs in particular have been targeted and supported. We've got the Spark Fund in our area. We've got the whole business energy efficiency scheme in our area, which is starting to kind of get a bit of traction with the SME community. There is always that. There is always that element of how do you get to the people who aren't already engaged. It's that it's easier to talk to the people who are already talking to you, and there is probably an element of there's some really keen organisations that are already very ambitious, very switched on, that are engaging very quickly. There's probably another line of organisations that are maybe just hanging back a little bit to see what happens, and probably another line of organisations that are almost in denial or don't see that this is relevant to them at the moment. And they're the ones that are hardest to reach, obviously. I think, clearly a multi-pronged approach has to be taken. There has to be the support out there, the mechanisms to attract those organisations. And I think there's also an element of they may need to be incentivised in, and actually their kind of bottom line might be the way to do that, because as energy prices increase, as regulation and policy changes demand more of organisations, as their customer base demands more of them in terms of their kind of green credentials, they will probably have to be moving towards innovation and implementing changes within their organisation just to survive. And I suppose at that point, that's where knowing roughly who they are and where they are enables those kind of support mechanisms that can act to kind of bring them into the fold and kind of bring them with us.
Great.
But I guess we can't rely on, kind of electricity prices alone to drive energy efficiency. We've seen electricity prices, rise exponentially over the last, 10 or 20 years, and we've not seen a commensurate level of energy efficiency across all industries, come from that. So we know we need something else other than the price threat. And I'd entirely agree with the points about engaging SMEs differently to kind of larger businesses. Within MPA, we've got a large number of SMEs, and they do need a different level of attention in the innovation space. But having said that, there is still, the kind of risk-averse nature in some larger companies. Not because an unwillingness to do something, but kind of hurdle rates are quite strict, and payback periods are quite strict because they've got other investment opportunities. So what we need to do is break down those kind of barriers, and I think that's where we need kind of business models from government to help with the deployment. Where we know we've got something that works, but it takes a bit longer to pay back than the normal investment. We've got to find a way of deploying that. And I think if we look at the experience with renewable energy, government has put a huge amount of investment into renewable energy, and that's brought down the wholesale cost of power. It's coming at quite a considerable increase in the policy costs, so the total delivered energy cost is very high now. But what it's done is make renewable power cost competitive compared to high carbon alternatives. If government were wise, I would suggest it should move that support from what is now cost competitive renewable energy into industrial applications, and that's where I think we really need to shift the support right now.
I also think there's an opportunity here to push the sort of the social returns on sort of innovation investment. The fact that money investment. I mean, many studies show that when governments invest in technologies or invest in innovations, that actually the returns, not just to the businesses that are involved, but actually how that money is then invested through, fair wages, through job creation. That investment into regions, especially in the less well-performing areas, can have a huge impact. We've focused, on business quite rightly, and we focus on academia and things like that. But what I think an area that the innovation money, and I think potentially would make it more palatable for that level of investment to be made by governments, the necessary level of investment to be made by governments, if there is more focus on the social returns to the wider citizen, if you like.
Well, that comes with government kind of valuing our manufacturing industry, and there's not always evidence of that, I'm afraid, David. That's part of the problem.
Agree. Yeah.
Great. So very lively discussion, and just want to, as the almost getting closer to the end now, just want to switch topics slightly in terms of the Industrial Energy Efficiency Accelerator, which is now also open for new application, has also extended scope for this phase and also includes now resource efficiency besides energy efficiency. So I was just wondering to get some views from our panel about how does resource efficiency fits into the wider industrial decarbonization. Maybe Paul, you want to share some views on that?
Well, just to say that, I don't know if the other panelists will have seen the presentation yesterday from Baroness Brown, but from the Climate Change Committee, who, if you haven't, I'm sure you've seen the reports from the Climate Change Committee that show just the sheer challenge of what has to be done and the curves of carbon reduction over the next 30 years. And what they show is that, as I said earlier, it takes a while for, we're waiting for hydrogen and CCUS, but in the meantime, to keep on the trajectory, we need the savings from energy and resource efficiency. And resource efficiency is actually a decent chunk of that overall carbon saving. So we're really keen to get to sort of step that up in this phase of the IEA and bring in resource efficiency projects. And that can be waste reduction, use of less raw materials, use of better, lower carbon raw materials. So really keen to see that, and that's important. And it can be, and it's good. I guess what's good about it is it's often a supply chain, a wider value chain issue, which is good, but brings its own challenges. So I'm interested. I haven't got the answers, but maybe I'll ask the other panelists for the how resource efficiency fits into the picture, and what if you've got examples of work you're doing on that as well as energy saving.
Yeah, maybe I could start. I mean, our project in the IEA, which is on low carbon multi-component cements, is all about lower CO2, better energy efficiency, and improved resource efficiency. And the cement industry right now already uses over a million tons per year of waste and byproducts from other industries. That's a huge kind of circular economy benefit. We use products and waste, or byproducts and waste, from everything from iron and steel manufacture to motor manufacturing, ceramics, power generation. There's a whole list of industries that the cement industry is connected to, and providing essentially a waste outlet, either for raw materials or for both raw materials and energy value, because we can burn waste in cement kilns and attract the energy value from that waste, but also the ash that's created from burning that waste becomes part of the cement. So that means we haven't sent any process waste to landfill from UK cement production since 2012. So they're the kind of things, and we're always looking for new sources, and we've literally just signed an Innovate UK project agreement on using calcined clay, so brick waste in cement production. So we've got a new innovation starting now for the next 2 years, a new program, and that again, to reduce brick waste in the UK.
Anyone else wants to chip in there? Yeah, Alexandra.
I was just going to say, so the textile services industry is essentially a circular economy industry. We don't kind of sell products, we rent products, we launder them, and we use them over and over again until their end of life. But that isn't to say that there isn't a massive areas for us and opportunities for us to improve that. If you look at the cotton, for example, in our products, the value chain of cotton, the supply chain of cotton is extensive and it's global, and there is opportunities for us to improve every single step of the process of the development of the actual products to its end of life, and making sure that its end of life isn't an end of life, but it goes back into the cycle of repurposing into new product, which, you know, it's possible, it can be done, it is being done. But I think there's definitely scope within our industry to improve that. And just to mention that the project that we have within the program, the IEA program, is again focused on carbon reduction, but also looking at water reduction. So as well as being energy intensive within our industry, obviously, because we're fundamentally laundries, we're water intensive as well. So we're looking at how can we reduce our water burden, our water impact? Can we look at recycling more of the water through our processes? So I think there's also opportunity to link up. How can you get multiple savings across all the resources, rather than maybe just focus on pure carbon savings? Because the carbon savings will come with other opportunities and other process changes and other new technologies and innovations as well.
Yeah, I think it's as the other two panelists have said, it's part of a holistic approach. It is a significant part of the holistic approach. Energy and resource efficiency in all its forms are part of that, as well as the fuel switching and carbon capture and all the rest of it. You know, we don't have a lot of time. We've got 29 years before we reach 2050, let alone the fact that we've only got 4 minutes left on this panel discussion here. But it's, you know, I mean, we need all of these, or any initiatives, any innovations to help us reach that target.
Yeah, I heard the other day someone say waste is just a resource that's in the wrong place, in the same way that a weed is just a plant in the wrong place. And I think that's kind of indicative of the kind of mind shift we need to have, because I agree with David that it needs to be a holistic approach. But I think that is already starting to happen, and there are lots of examples, and Richard's talked about a few, of kind of industrial symbiosis, but even at the kind of smaller business and smaller industry level, as Alexandra was saying, that there are so many small interventions that you can make internally within your own business to save water, to replace old inefficient lighting with LED lighting, that kind of thing. That actually has a positive impact on the business, because it creates savings that can then be ploughed back into more efficiency measures and that kind of thing. But it just reinforces that mentality and brings the staff on the journey as well. So I think that there's so many positive aspects to the idea of this kind of resource management. And it's probably more accessible in a lot of ways to a lot of businesses than the energy efficiency thing, but it could be a gateway into bigger projects and bigger innovations.
If I may, in the few seconds we've got left, just highlight the importance of the regulators in the resource efficiency space, because using somebody else's waste as a product, as a process input, isn't that easy, and the regulators have got a massive role to play there.
Great. And just to conclude the session, I would like to ask each one of you just for one like key lesson learned, or like one piece of advice that you would like to share with industrial companies that are listening to us now. And considering of time, if you could keep it to like 1 or 2 sentences max, would be much appreciated.
So I would say, so I would say it's collaboration, it's communication, and that will lead to trust and solutions.
Great.
I would say do something, do anything to make that start on the journey, because it will lead to more.
I would say to small organisations that don't know where to start, just again, as Karen said, do something. Don't think about running before you can walk. We don't expect everybody to be net zero tomorrow, but do something. And
I would say start early, because don't underestimate the legal delays in putting an application together and a consortium agreement.
So I'm going to agree with everyone else. So we're all saying this. We're all saying, do it. Don't wait. Everything's got to happen. It's all going to happen. Time is going to evaporate. So just start the journey now.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining. Thank you for this discussion. And we will now go to a 15-minute coffee break. And after the break, you will be hearing from my colleague, Elaine Smith-Gillespie, who will be talking some more about how to manage the challenges of meeting science-based targets and reaching net zero. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.